You ever notice how two people can live through the same meeting, the same relationship, the same text thread, and walk away with completely different realities? One person thinks, we're good, that was productive. The other thinks, that felt tense. Are we okay? Here's something to think about. A lot of conflict isn't about values or intelligence, it's about different operating systems, different default settings, different ways of reading the room. And that's why personality tests keep showing up in our lives, not because they're some magical tool, but because we're all trying to answer one question. Who am I dealing with, and how do I not screw this up? Welcome back to Thinking and Being. If you like what you see today, please be sure to like and subscribe, as it will keep content like this from myself and others coming your way. So why this particular topic? If you've ever tried to learn personality tests, it feels like walking into a Home Depot and someone says, don't worry, the only way to build a house is memorize every tool. Myers-Briggs type indicator, DISC, Enneagram, HEXACO, Big Five, Strengths Finder, love languages, attachment styles, culture frameworks. At some point, you're like, am I learning human nature or collecting Pokemon? So the real reason this topic matters is compression. You don't need more tests, you just need a simple way to know which test is for which job. Because the payoff isn't trivia, the payoff is practical. Picking better friends, choosing better partners, leading teams without constant friction, communicating in a way that actually lands, and also spotting when you're getting manipulated, sold to, or emotionally hijacked. So today is all about a mental map that makes all of these tests usable. And there's an old song from 1959 called Personality by Lloyd Price. And it's funny because it's basically a personality test, before personality tests were a thing. The whole song is him saying, look, I can keep trying to prove my love, I can do the motions, but the reason I'm hooked is something deeper. And then he lists the checklist, the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you smile, all the charm. And the punchline is, plus you've got a big heart. In other words, personality isn't just style, it's signal. It's the pattern people feel when you enter the room. And that's why personality models exist at all, because humans have always been trying to explain the same mystery. Why do some people pull us in? And why do some people drain us? And why do some teams click instantly when others feel like friction? That song is basically saying we're not just attracted to actions, we're attracted to the operating system behind the actions. So here's a simple causal loop that involves personalities. So first, you start with different defaults. You have different pace, different needs, different values, which leads to misinterpretation. Things like thinking that somebody's lazy or cold or controlling, which leads to defensive behaviors, pushing back, withdrawing, criticizing, avoiding, which in turn leads to trust decreasing. And then that in turn leads to less curiosity, less listening, and back to more misinterpretation. You can break the loop with one intervention. Replace judgment with a diagnostic question. What do you need right now? Certainty, time, reassurance, or clarity. So let's start with a master key, because once you get this, all the tests stop feeling confusing and intimidating, and they can be quite fun. A personality test is not an identity. It's a model. It's a shortcut your brain uses to answer things like, what's this person likely to do next? What do they respond to? Where do they get stuck? What stresses them out? What makes them feel respected? And that explains something important. Different tests disagree because they're trying to measure different layers of the human. Some measure traits, like sliders, more or less of something. Some measure types, like categories. You're mostly this vibe. Some are designed for work behavior. Some are for inner motivation. Some are for research accuracy. So the goal is not to find the one true test, it's to build a small toolkit, like 3 lenses that you can use or rotate depending on the situation. And here's the theme that ties into relationships. Most relationship problems aren't bad people problems. They're mismatched assumptions about what's normal. Personality models help you stop assuming everyone is you. So there's bucket A, which are the type models. These are the ones that people love because they're memorable. They're the you're a blank tests. things like MBTI, Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, also known as 16 personalities. Another one is Enneagram, which we'll talk about. And then a third one is DISC, D-I-S-C. These come from psychological narrative tradition, how people experience themselves, how they relate, what motivates them, how they show up. And then there's the second bucket, bucket B, trait models. These are the ones researchers love because they're measurable. They're the you score high or low on type of tests. Those include Big Five and HEXACO. These come from psychometrics and personality research, trying to describe personality with dimensions that hold up statistically across time and cultures. So the origin matters because it tells you what the tool is for. If you want a conversation starter, type models shine. If you want something closer to prediction, traits are usually stronger. And this is also where people get burned. They use a type test like it's a scientific diagnosis, or they use a trait test like it's a motivational story. So just be careful that you don't use the wrong tool for the wrong job. So first, let's talk about DISC. DISC is basically how you show up in a meeting test. It's trying to predict your observable behavior under pressure. Are you fast or cautious, direct or diplomatic, task first or people first? DISC is about how you move through the world. So DISC involves 4 different categories. D for dominance, and you can see the traits that associate with it there. I for influence, and sometimes it's shown as a small I as their trademark. S for steadiness, and then C for compliance. So some people push forward and decide quickly. Some people stabilize, harmonize, and keep the peace. Some people analyze and slow the room down. Some people sell, energize, and rally the team. If you've ever had a boss who wants the answer in 30 seconds and you're the person who needs the spreadsheet, that's not bad attitude, that's just a style mismatch. DISC, you can use it for teamwork, communication, friction, leadership style, sales interactions. But don't use it for deep identity, mental health, and who you really are. The best DISC move is not labeling people, it's adjusting your delivery. If someone is high D, direct or decisive, lead with the point, give options, let them choose. If someone is high I, influencing or expressive, match the energy, paint the vision, but be human first. If someone is high S, steady, supportive, slow down, reassure, and ask how it impacts people. And then if someone is high C, careful or analytical, bring them evidence, define terms, don't pressure them. So DISC is a translation tool. It turns they're being difficult into they need info, clarity, time, or warmth. A lot of workplace drama is just poor translation. And then there's the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, also known as 16 personalities. MBTI is the personality test that refuses to die, and there's a reason. It's sticky. It gives people a language for differences. Introversion versus extroversion, concrete versus abstract thinking, logic versus values, structure versus flexibility. So you can see in the model, there's E and I, extroversion versus introversion. There's S and N, sensing versus intuition. There's T and F, thinking versus feeling. And then J and P, judging or perceiving. So putting these together, you basically get 4 letters that describe your personality. 1 letter from each side of this spectrum, which then translates to 16 different personalities, as you can see here. And you can also see the traits that describe each of these personalities. Feel free to stop the video and read all about each of these. Also, in 16 personalities, there are names for each of these different personalities, grouped into 4 areas, where 4 of them are considered analysts, 4 are sentinels, 4 are diplomats, and 4 are explorers. So, for example, within the analyst group, you have architects, logicians, commanders, and debaters. MBTI's real superpower is self-reflection. People read a type description and go, wait, that's me. It can help you understand why you recharge the way you do, why you hate certain work environments, and why some conversations drain you. But you have to hold it correctly. MBTI is more of a psychological lens than a scientific ruler. It's not you are this forever, it's more like your default settings tend to look like this. So use it for language for differences, career fit discussions, and relationship friction. But be careful, don't treat it like it's a blood type.
Oh, hey, how's it going? I'm great. I'm a busy man, you're a busy woman. Let's not waste time, okay? I like you. Do you like me?
Yes.
All right, dinner Saturday at 7?
Yes.
Roger that. I'll email you a calendar invite.
Am I making too much eye contact? Actually, I don't think I'm making enough eye contact. Let's kick this up a notch.
And here's some ways that MBTI becomes useful. For energy management, some people recharge alone, while some people recharge with people. For information style, some want facts and details, others just want patterns and possibilities. For decision style, some choose based on efficiency, others choose based on impact and meaning. For lifestyle, some need structure, others need flexibility. So instead of my partner doesn't listen, it becomes they listen differently. They want examples, not theories, or they want the point, not the story, or they need time to process, not pressure. And instead of my coworker is chaotic, it becomes they optimize for speed and adaptability. MBTI is basically a conflict reducer if you treat it as a map and not as a fence. Then there's Enneagram. If DISC is how you act and MBTI is how you process, then Enneagram is trying to get at why, your core motivation, your core fear, your default coping strategy. That's why people get hooked. Enneagram feels uncomfortably accurate sometimes because it goes straight to the emotional engine. Craving safety, craving significant, craving love, craving control, craving peace, craving achievement. In an Enneagram, there are 9 core types around a circle. Your core type is your home base, the main motivation fear pattern you default to. The adjacent numbers adjacent to your number are called wings. You can lean on one wing more than the other, which flavors your type. If you're a 9, for example, then your wings are 8 and 1. You might be a 9W8, which is more assertive, or a 9W1, more principled. Wings don't change your core type, they just add some style. The lines inside the circle are stress and growth moves. Enneagram has connecting lines that show where you tend to move when your system shifts. A common modern way to use it is under stress, you may take on the traits of one connected type. Under growth and security, you may take on traits of another connected type. So an example is a type 6 is connected to 3 and 9. People often say under stress, they can look like the less healthy side of one line, and under security, they can access the healthier traits of the other line. But the practical takeaway is the same. You don't stay static necessarily. You shift in predictable directions. Your number is your default, your wings are your flavor, and the lines are your shift pattern when life turns the pressure up or down. And you also notice that not all numbers connect. You'll also notice that there are 3 parts depending on what your number is. There's personality types that relate to your gut, 8, 9, and 1. There are those that relate to your heart, 2, 3, and 4, and those that relate to your head, 5, 6, and 7. So this is a very inner life model. It's less about workplace behavior and more about patterns you repeat in relationships, especially under stress. Use it for self-awareness, relationship dynamics, emotional triggers, and growth edges. But don't use it for turning it into astrology and excusing bad behavior. So here's a useful Enneagram move. It helps you stop arguing about the surface because a lot of fights aren't about the dishes. They're about feeling unseen, feeling unsafe, feeling controlled, feeling disrespected, feeling like you're failing. Enneagram gives you a behind-the-scenes view. So instead of why are you so intense, you can ask, why are you trying to protect right now? Instead of why do you need so much reassurance, you can ask, what story are you telling yourself in your head? If you want the best use case, Enneagram helps you see the loop you run when stressed and gives you a path to interrupt it. Now let's shift from the type models to the trait models based on research. Big 5 is the personality model that shows up in academic research because it's built around traits you can measure reliably over time. So it contains 5 sliders. First, there's openness. You can be curious and imaginative versus practical or conventional. Then there's conscientiousness, which you can be organized and disciplined versus spontaneous and messy. Then there's extroversion, where you can be energized by people versus energized by solitude. Then there's agreeableness, where you can be cooperative and empathetic versus skeptical and blunt. And then there's neuroticism, which is your stress sensitivity and emotional volatility. So this model is less fun and more useful if you care about prediction. things like job performance patterns, relationship satisfaction correlations, stress resilience. So you want to use it for grounding, self-awareness with fewer labels, and for coaching. It's not great for tell me my destiny. So here's how Big Five becomes actionable. High conscientiousness, build routines and systems. You thrive on structure. Low conscientiousness, don't force protection. Design for friction, reduction, and accountability. High neuroticism, you're not weak, you're sensitive. Prioritize sleep, boundaries, and predictability. Low neuroticism, you're resilient, but watch blind spots around risk. High openness, you need novelty and meaning. Boredom is your enemy. Low openness, you value stability. Too much change feels like chaos. This model helps you design your environment around who you already are, instead of constantly trying to fix yourself into somebody else. And then there's HEXACO. HEXACO is like Big Five's cousin that adds one trait that matters a lot in real life: honesty, humility. The different dimensions of HEXACO are honesty, humility, openness to experience, conscientiousness, emotional control, extroversion, and agreeableness. So it's derived from the Big Five, but adds that one element. So honesty, humility is basically sincerity, fairness, modesty, and resistance to exploiting others. So when you're asking, is this person trustworthy? Is this leader toxic? Is this salesperson manipulating me? HEXACO gives language for that dynamic. It also matters a lot because of modern problems. Scams, corporate grift, political manipulation, dating games nonsense are not just personality differences. They're differences in ethical orientation. This one you want to use for character and trust conversations, leadership screening, and red flag detection. And then last, there's the competing values framework, which is one of my favorites. And it's about why organizations feel like different planets. The competing values framework is the odd one out. It's not your personality. It's the culture operating system of teams and organizations. It answers, what does this place reward? Stability versus flexibility, internal focus versus external results. So one culture is process, risk, management, consistency. Another is innovation, speed, creativity. Another one would be people, belonging, and coaching. Another is competition, targets, and winning. There's basically 4 quadrants in the competing values framework. The green is about creating and doing things first. Yellow is about collaborating and doing things together. Red is about control and doing things right. Blue is about competing and doing things fast. And here you can see more about each of those quadrants. Feel free, again, to stop the video. So all this matters because you can be a perfectly fine human and still feel miserable if you're in the wrong culture. It also gives a clean explanation for why smart people leave jobs. Not because the job is bad, but because the culture is misaligned with what they need to function. So now let's compress all these into one toolkit if we can. DISC is about how you communicate and behave at work. MBTI, Myers-Briggs type indicator, also known as 16 personalities, is about how you process information and make decisions. Enneagram is why you react the way you do under stress. Big Five and HEXACO are research-grounded traits and also help us learn about ethics and trust in individuals. And then the competing values framework is about the culture around you. It's basically the water you're swimming in. So instead of trying to memorize all these systems, you can treat them like lenses and pick your favorites. So let's try a few life scenarios and see how these tests might apply. So first, in relationships and dating. Don't confuse chemistry with compatibility. Dating apps basically reward vibes and surface traits, but long-term happiness is mostly about fit and friction management. So use the test like this. For discs, do we move at the same speed? Fast decision maker versus slow processor. MBTI, you could say, do we argue because we think differently? Details versus big picture. Enneagram, what do we need when we're stressed? Pursue, withdraw, control, or people please? For HEXACO, do I trust their character when nobody's watching? So you have to ask yourself, are you falling for a type or are you building with a real person? Scenario 2 in relationships could be long-term conflict. Most fights are just translation failures. A lot of couples fight like they're debating the facts when they're actually negotiating needs. So some cheat codes might be high steadiness types want safety, tone, and reassurance before solutions. High dominance types want the headline, the decision, and the momentum. Big Five can tell us that high neuroticism doesn't mean drama. It often means sensitivity to uncertainty. And then Enneagram tells us that conflict is often a threat response. Control, retreat, appease, attack. Stop arguing about content. Diagnose the operating system. And then a third relationship scenario, parenting. And just understand that you're not raising a clone. Parenting gets easier when you accept your kid's brain is not yours. So in Big Five, conscientiousness differences explain why kids need structure and the other needs coaching. MBTI tells us that some kids learn by experimenting, others need instructions and examples. So DISC says that some kids respond to directness, others shut down without warmth first. HEXACO says that character training matters as much as performance, especially in a world of scams and shortcuts. And then a workplace scenario, boss friction. Asking the question, why are they like this? Boss conflict is often style mismatch plus a reward system mismatch. So, for example, use DISC to match their communication. So, bullets for D, energy for I, reassurance for S, evidence for C. In Big Five, high conscientiousness bosses read loose as careless. In Enneagram, your boss's stress pattern might look like micromanaging, withdrawing, or blame. One practical move could be send your updates in their preferred format, not yours. It might feel unfair, but it also works. And then another workplace scenario would be like team dynamics. And every team needs a mix of roles. Most teams fail because they accidentally hire clones. A balanced team has a driver that pushes decisions, a connector that keeps morale and relationships healthy, a stabilizer that creates consistency in process, and a skeptic that manages quality control and risk. So if your team only has drivers, you may end up in chaos and burnout. If you have only skeptics, you may end up in paralysis. If you have only connectors, you'll have vibes with no delivery. If you have only stabilizers, you'll have no innovation. What role are you naturally, and what role does your team lack? Another scenario in the workplace, hiring and career fit. People choose careers based on status, pay, or what sounds impressive, and then they wonder why they're miserable. So you can use tests to find fit. High openness, you'll suffocate in repetitive environments. Low openness, constant change will feel like living in a tornado. High extroversion, remote only may drain you over time. High conscientiousness, you'll thrive where standards matter. And HEXACO can tell you how to choose environments where integrity is rewarded, not punished. Career happiness is less about the job title and more about the daily psychological tax. And a final reality check. Personality tests are maps, not identities. So don't use tests to label, stereotype, or excuse bad behavior. Use them to predict friction, improve communication, and to design environments. Treat results as likely defaults, not permanent destiny. If it helps you become more curious and less reactive, it's working. And back to the song. That Lloyd Price song kind of nails the whole point. Personality isn't a label, it's a lived pattern. These tests aren't here to box you in. They're here to help you notice the pattern so you can communicate better, choose better relationships, build better teams, and stop getting surprised by the same friction over and over. So all the links to each of these tests are in the description below if you'd like to try them. Okay, that's all for this week. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep thinking and being, and do not go gentle into that good night.